On October the 11th, I loaded up the stream to business as usual, getting creeped on by a fresh set of bandits. Now, before I had ended the previous stream, I did kill a set of bandits and I thought that I had got them all, but apparently I was wrong. And also apparently I am really not trigger happy enough. If I was, maybe I wouldn't have gotten bludgeoned with an axe as I did here. Anyways, if you can't tell by now, things are beginning to get a little bit iffy at the Woodlands base. Now, despite my best efforts and burying corpses and all, I have not been able to keep up with the corpse stink or the depression caused by it. Living in a graveyard, simply put, is getting to me. But I still haven't gained access to the mall, which is my primary purpose out here. So the plan for the day was to build a fence trap in the kill zone in order to aid me in my goal. But the benefits of that fence trap would come later, so let's move on to the next day when I would once again nearly die to bandits. So there I was, minding my own business. And suddenly, I was getting shot. They were here, the goon squad. But most troubling of all, they were actually firing on me at my elevated position on the second floor, which is something bandits don't usually do. Oh, can I not wake up to getting shot, holy fuck. And I'm not gonna lie, this made me panic. So I jumped over the side, and in the process, I lost my goddamn horns of power. And to make matters worse, as I skirted the boundary of my camp, another separate bandit pulled up from the north, while the squad from the south continued shooting at me, knocking me over. And on top of everything else that was already going wrong, I was fully sick from the corpse stink graveyard effect. And then, to add insult to injury, Gerardo Coleman made the most embarrassing, weak, pissant anguish moan I have ever heard in my entire life when he fell over. Disgusting. Luckily, despite all the shooting, my bulletproof armors had absorbed the bullets. And for once, my feet had not been targeted and I wasn't limping. But nevertheless, fighting back into my base would not be easy because I wouldn't be able to take the goon squad head on even terrain. They had 3 rifles and I only had the 1. So I skirted the combat zone for a minute looking for an opening, but then I thought better of it. I would just come back later, and by then, maybe things would have sorted themselves out if I was lucky. In the meantime, since I couldn't beat the bandits, I decided to take a fight that I could win instead. And I decided to fight the zombies at the mall with my fence trap, and of course with the aid of the many vehicles in my vehicle armada. Of course, with my lowish level carpentry, the fence trap was pretty quickly damaged and torn down. And then a fog rolled in, which would delay my return to base even longer until it had dissipated. But around midday, it did, and I headed back where I would join forces with the Zeds for once to overcome the bandits while harnessing the power of my Jeep 4x4. Now, we did of course once again take control of the Woodlands base, but the same problems with the corpse stink and the depression it caused, and a general wariness of bandits would remain. So I decided to leave the base for the evening and went over to my safe house at the gas station by the highway. There I spent the night drinking water from the toilet and reading in the bedroom. And though I was safe for the time being, one problem was still bothering me. I needed a fresh set of antlers. Anyway, with my problems mounting the way that they were, it was kind of time to make a move. So I began preparing to make a little second-story safe house inside of the movie theater, which at this point was mostly safe from zombies. So I put up a couple of doors and I broke down the hallway. It wasn't everything that I would need to do, but it was a start. And after that, I would of course spend some time skirmishing with the Zeds by the mall and freak myself out with this new bug that made me think I was drinking gas. But after all of that, I wound down the night venting my frustrations on the Zeds until it got so dark I couldn't see. And the following day, I improved the Woodlands base because honestly, I was still holding out hope that I might continue living there. And then I repaired the fence trap, as fence traps really do wonders against enemies of every kind. And then I headed back to the quarantine zone for a much needed change of pace, and perhaps more importantly, to put on that fresh pair of antlers. But the plan for the day of the 15th was to cross the event horizon. We were about 100 days in, and the ash had stopped falling weeks ago now, and then the bitter cold of nuclear winter had also stopped. So I was left with the question of whether or not the nuclear radiation was still there. So we drove to the edge of the bomb line and held our breath. As it turned out, the radiation was gone. It's Fallout free! But not only that, the bomb line was only like 2 blocks wide, which meant that Louisville
Wait, are you kidding me?
was largely still intact.
What happened here?
I really don't know how or why the bombs landed like this. I suspect it is a bug, but nonetheless, it was now time to explore Louisville.
Are you fucking kidding me? This whole time. It was like one screen length of being nuked.
And explore it we did, and what we found was that the Zed population was alive and well and fully 16x. So after that discovery, we headed back, but as we did, we happened to see a survivor.
No shot.
And then our stupid, foolish, good Samaritan reflex kicked in.
Get in, dude.
And we tried to get him into our van. But to be honest, it was probably curiosity more than anything that made me want to help him. He was, in fact, the first friendly survivor I had seen in quite a while. And then seeing him in the middle of a place I thought had been completely nuked meant I just couldn't resist interacting with him. Then, of course, he died to the Zeds, and then after that, my van ran out of gas. Everything was going wrong and escalating fast, the way things tend to do during the apocalypse. Then I happened to swing on a crawler while nearly getting rear-ended by a sprinter. Things went from 0 to full code red in about 10 seconds flat. But in all honesty, there wasn't really a need to panic. There might have been a lot of Zeds around, but Zeds are very stupid and easily outmaneuvered. And suffice it to say, I was actually able to escape and return to the relative safety of the meth trailer in the quarantine zone without too much of a hassle. But the next day, it was time to do something good for once and show some appreciation.
Bro, this is killing me. Whatever's causing this bug. It like does it faster while you're moving.
It was time to honor the fallen dead, the brave men and women who gave their lives defending the quarantine zone and whose sacrifice had allowed Gerardo Coleman a good 2 to 3 months of relative peace living there. And after the ceremonial booze was imbibed and the good Dr. Skylord had said a few words, these brave heroes were finally laid to rest. Then on the 17th, we'd once again head into Louisville to do reconnaissance on the LSU library, because books thus far have been very scarce, and they've kind of been my #1 motivator as far as exploration goes. Now, we have been hoping to score books in the Crossroads Mall, but failing that, the LSU library, which is still standing and not nuked, is sure to have books. I mean, it has to. It's a very large library. And insanely rare loot or not, I'll be damned if I infiltrate the place and the only thing that I find is one singular tailoring level 3 book. Anyway, that being said, the area was completely overran with Zeds, and finding a location for a forward operating base was giving me some difficulty. That is, until we came across the little strip mall and motel area, which was relatively abandoned by the Zeds. Here we decided to loot the area briefly because it had a VHS store, and we did score a couple of VHS tapes in the process, and afterwards we returned to base to take care of some more important things. Now, before I could leave the following day, some bandits would show up and embroil us in a little bit of an awkward standoff, but after I finished them off, it was time to make the movie theater an actual base, with sledgehammered stairs and escape ropes, you know, the full deal. And then I would sleep on the roof with a tent, but doing so was making me nervous. The fact is, the roof is so large that I have to worry about the possibility that bandits might spawn up there. But that's a problem for another day. And by another day, I mean like the next day. Because after spending most of the 19th fighting Zeds for access to the mall, I retired to my safe rooftop to get some sleep. Of course, I was then woken up in the middle of the night in total darkness to a magical wizard primitive bandit running at me.
Whoa, 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 whoa. They did spawn up here. Oh my god. At least I can play the door against him. I hate always being right about bullshit.
Fortunately, he was alone because the rest of his tribe
They're fighting each other. Oh my god.
had also spawned
Look at
up
this.
there with another bandit group, and they were fighting each other on the
It's
far end of
magical
the roof.
fucking bandits versus veteran types. Yeah, that does answer that. Whoa, are they knocking each other off the roof? Look, he's gonna make them walk the plank. And then I just come in and kill everybody. Wait, the primitive bandits, the primitive wizards are kind of... The primitive wizards are winning. Holy shit. He's letting them loot. Don't let them loot, bro. They can pick up guns. Whoa, 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 whoa. They just disappeared and I got a bunch of errors. Oh, they're back. Yeah, and he's just gonna pull out a fucking rifle. Don't get up. Don't you do it.
In the end, somehow the primitives ended up winning, and then I finished off the remainder.
I think more spawned on the ground level and they're yelling.
And then, as I was looting them, I was troubled by some bandit from the ground floor shooting up at me. You just really are never truly safe with bandits in the game.
Did someone just take a shot at me up here? Bro, he's shooting at me from ground level on the roof. Holy. Or he's shooting me through the floor. Oh, we're breaking the game in a million fucking pieces right now.
Anyway, after running that bozo over, I'd get aggressive with a fresh BMW at the mall, which is really one of the better vehicles I've found when it comes to running over Zeds. Then, after doing that for a while, I would actually take my first steps inside of the mall. And I'd even clear out the West End entrance. We were finally getting somewhere. Or so I thought. Despite everything, the Zed presence inside the mall was anything but thinned out, which is a fact that would begin to make itself clear the following day, as I continued working my way through the mall. And now that I was actually getting inside, the bandits would become even more dangerous, as it's a simple matter of fact that they are generally easier to deal with in big open spaces as opposed to confined dark ones. And speaking of bandits, it would be that night that the first Mad Max Bandits showed up, and this is how that all went down.
What the fuck? Dude, this guy's got the metal armor. Fucking the Mad Max, and he had a sword? Oh my god. Ah! Oh, don't you bandage, you motherfucker. I have no more bullets.
The situation would ironically get somewhat complicated by my machete breaking and the fact that I had ran out of ammo. So I was forced to flee as far as my fence trap, which also works wonders against bandits, much the same as Zeds.
Man, this is getting fucking primeval out here. Medieval.
Oh, dude, the one-handed mace is so good.
I think there was 6 of them in all, and after dealing with them and their Zed companions, I made sure to refresh my weapons and ammo, because you really can't let yourself get caught out without ammo against bandits, or at least it's a very bad idea to do so. Anyway, after the day's events, it was, of course, time to journal into the map like a real Apocalypse Andy. I woke up on the 22nd of October in my movie theater base, and then I spent the day looting the bandits that had spawned on the roof and doing other base chores like getting started on the sky moat, which would turn out to be a good idea for the future, but for now it was just a major source of muscle strain. The type of muscle strain you have to pop pills in order to deal with. Anyway, other than putting down a rain collector, not much else would happen that night, but I would finally fall underweight. Anyway, I would get an early start the following day, but I would also have a little bit of a mix-up with a fresh set of Zeds who had launched themselves against the security windows on the western entrance of the mall. They would, of course, crash the game, which always makes me uncomfortable because you can still hear the Zeds moaning and moving while your screen is frozen, and you always have to wonder if you're gonna get bitten during the freeze time. But thankfully, that didn't happen, and of course the game creates a backup for you when it does crash, so you're relatively safe actually when the game does decide to crap out like this. The one relative downside though, is that when I had spawned in, all of those Zeds had been disappeared. Anyway, after that old chestnut, it was time to get to work, because no matter how many I killed or how many got disappeared, there was always more, even when it looked like there wasn't. So after running through my immense stores of 45 magazines and of course beating off sprinters and Utilizing my infamous little fence trap, I would of course run down the Zeds with my vehicles, and even hotwire a semi-truck to do more of the same. But my objective for the day was to get into the northern entrance of the mall, which was the restaurant area of the mall. But the sound of my speed demon reverse engine revving would collect a horde so vast that I'd have to call off trying to get into the mall for the day. And instead I would loot the little Zippy Mart attached to the Knox Bank and the bakery. And then I would visit the now defunct Woodland base for a fresh resupply. It's really a shame, but the Woodland base is just so riddled with so many corpses that living there has become too much of a burden. At this point in the playthrough, depression was really kicking my ass. Anyway, on the 25th, I continued penetrating the mall, and I had the bright idea of looting this double holster from a Zed I had killed the day before so that I could use 2 handguns since I was flush with handgun ammo but out of long gun ammo. Then in the process of doing that, the bull jankery would strike. Bandits whose existence was unknown to me would stalk and lurk in the shelter of the shadows, somehow peacefully coexisting with the Zeds, would suddenly shoot me from the darkness, and of course, once again target my feet. I was stricken instantly with a nasty limp, as has become the tradition, and then the permutations about how to survive the situation would immediately begin to swarm my alcohol-fogged mind. At first I thought I would limp through the back hallways and burst down a wall with the sledgehammer and limp to the safety of my vehicle. A vehicle is, after all, the only truly safe place in all of a week 1 run. But as phase 1 came to completion, when I entered a side hall and was able to treat myself, I was surprised in a doorway by a charging bandit. Assuming incorrectly that he was the last of his cadre, I was once again lodged with a fresh bullet, now in the thigh. They were working themselves from the ground up. My groin was next on the chopping block. Not good, but I had an ace down my pants, or up my sleeve rather, an exploit, and desperate times call for desperate measures. And all the bull jankery on the table, this was no time to honor the rules of engagement. Gerardo Coleman would do anything to survive, and he did, using the run while reloading mod to cancel the limp and to move at speed. Doing this, I was able to get distance between me and the shooters, but more importantly, the Zeds who were now collaborating with them. And with my limp and the unsilenced firepower I had, the truth is, I probably wouldn't have been able to get to the safety of my vehicle before getting overwhelmed by Zeds, not without the exploit. So shamelessly, ruthlessly, Gerardo Coleman exploited, and we blamed the unstable nature of Build 42 and mods and their imperfect collaboration for the entire situation, and we washed our hands of it, living on to fight another day.
Get out of here!
Back at base, we licked our wounds and used the downtime to finally finish off the sky moat. Muscle strain be damned, we were already hurting. Anyway, the rest of the day passed as you probably imagine. Reading and resting, eating and healing. Now, since we were injured, we decided we might as well head back up to the quarantine zone, which, as we'll demonstrate here, is not the bastion of safe living it once was. And as a wise man multiple times has said,
We have assholes.
anyway, after dealing with them, we passed the time watching TV, reading books, and catching fish. But that reminds me of my original purpose in coming back to the quarantine zone this time. My precious Colt Commando, which I had been relying on the last several months, finally broke, and I needed to replace it with a fresh M16. So after getting that done and transferring all the attachments between the guns, I decided I had enough time to head back to the movie theater, so I did. Then the next day, my limp was gone, and it was time once again to put my boot on the necks of my enemies
He's got set aggro.
and to root out the assholes lurking inside the inner dark of the mall.
Stop, you motherfucker.
There really can be no peace between us. Zed, human,
Don't get up.
we might as well all be the same at this point.
Fucking bitch.
Anyway, the dive into the mall would be cut short by the overwhelming stench of the dead corpses. So I headed back to base early. There I would receive confirmation of the wisdom in the construction of the sky moat. More primitive wizard bandits magically appeared on the roof, but they had done so on the far side of the moat, so they were stuck. But all things being equal, I took mercy on them and provided a way out. All's well that ends well, I guess. Now on to the 28th, when I breached the mall further and got into the restaurant quarter, where disappointment would compound and aggregate.
This could be the stupidest, maybe the stupidest thing I've ever done.
I was hoping at a minimum to at least acquire several bottles of ketchup, which if consumed raw did cause depression, but at the same time did wonders for weight management. But in truth, the restaurants were as barren as the Mojave Desert, and as we prepared to move south in the mall, seeking out the Sears store, banditos arrived on the scene and forced us out. So instead we worked outside with a helicopter overhead and a pilot who apparently decided nothing of interest was happening here, as he left pretty quickly, just in time for another set of bloodthirsty bandits to show up on the scene trying to pop a cap in my ass. But after putting the kibosh on them and doing some boring stuff at base, I decided to waste my time the following day by bringing a generator to the mall, which helped me with exactly nothing at all. Then I did make it into the Sears area finally, and the general darkness and scuffedness of this entire venture almost got me killed, once again, except my armor held up. Then after that, I struggled to get up the escalator some more and called it a day. Now on the 30th, I woke up to another collaboration between a Mad Max night and a Zed, which happened to collapse near the finish line. Unluckily for the knight, he was left with a sword in a rifle fight. But my morning routine being completed, it was time to investigate the nuclear status of West Point. There, of course, I would once again learn the truth. West Point, at least what I saw of it, remained intact. It wasn't nuked. In fact, a few wily soldiers continued to maintain the blockades, but as I arrived on scene, they were evidently falling beneath the combined weight of the zomboid masses.
Get out of there.
And I thought to myself, if I was ever to make my way south, I'd probably want to find a way to bypass West Point altogether, like by taking the railroad tracks. But that's a story for another time. For now, we'll just say that the nukes with the updated mod had seemed to miss both the main of Louisville and West Point. Anyway, back at the mall where I was dotting my T's and crossing my I's, I would bear witness to this funny and satisfying scene.
Oh my god, him screaming, "Get off me," that was awesome. Ugh.
But as it was getting late and dark, it was time to return to base once again, where I would finally get some running water.
Wow, we're actually becoming civilized.
Don't at me.
Now, despite the relative safety I had achieved at the movie theater, at least on the upper stories, the place still had its security issues. But even so, I should count my blessings after surviving yet another Zed Bandit collaboration. Anyway, on the first, I would continue to fight into the mall and its second story, and continue to struggle with depression and corpse stink, and of course get stalked by the mall bandits who were, once again, intermingling with the Zeds, resulting in this horror movie moment. But as October became November, and the mall continued to disappoint while simultaneously managing to be really effing dangerous, I was beginning to get fed up with the place. Especially now that I saw the loot was pretty scarce there, and then there were all these many bandit surprises in the dark, and even a wandering zombie surprise waiting for me at the bottom of this previously cleared escalator. Let's just say that in that moment, I was ready to swear this place off. Even if I hadn't completely scoured every source of loot within.
How is there so many down here?
The place was just proving to be too dangerous and too unrewarding, and it had already almost cost me my life too many times to count.
Bro, the fuck? Holy shit. I thought the
are
mall
you
was
all down
clear,
here?
then I go back downstairs to an area that's been cleared for like days, and it's just full of zombies. That area was completely clear for like days, and now it's full of zombies.
So for the second, it was time to take a chill homie vibes day and rip up some undies and some socks, and to foster some neck strain working on my tailoring, and of course reading literature, and to begin planning a new sort of mission elsewhere. So on the 3rd, I got ready to leave the movie theater base and headed back north, stopping by the fabled Woodland base for a last resupply. Then I took the Camaro along the now familiar roads between the mall and the quarantine zone, where of course some action was waiting for me. And of course 2 rifles suck at range for some reason, so I'd blow a bit of ammo dealing with that, but afterwards I headed up north towards the LSU library. Now, this was to be a stealth mission, and the Ocano Rooms Motel was to be my forward operating base. I spent my first evening there getting a feel for the path I'd have to travel and the positioning of the Zeds. After the bloodbath that was the Crossroads Mall, I wanted to try a different strategy. What I found was that I would be able to get close to the target without having to kill too many Zeds, but what I wasn't counting on was just how complicated things would get for a stealth mission if and when bandits decided to rain on my parade. Anyway, on my way home, I found a gray spliffo laying in the grass, and because it was night or something, he didn't seem to mind letting me walk right up to him. So I did, and then I took him home. And it was kind of funny sleeping with him in the room because he had a pretty deep growl, and I passed the night listening to his rather ominous animal sounds. And in hindsight, doing this might have been unlucky. Anyway, then I got up early the next day and dove into my new stealth mission. Now, it was kind of a long way to go by foot, so I took the Camaro about as close as I dared, taking care to attract as little attention to myself as I could. And then we began working our way up the neighborhood. We would, of course, get some attention, but it was nothing overwhelming. And then, seeing as there was quite the crowd at the library itself, we decided we might as well try to create a diversion. Unfortunately, the firecrackers I had seemed to be duds, and the only diversion I succeeded in creating really was just running through the street, which is to say, no diversion at all. The purpose of a diversion is to have Zeds not follow you. Nonetheless, I was still able to shake the Zeds that followed me, and eventually I cleared enough of them to get close to the library. I would actually even get inside, but things were still a little bit hot for my liking, so I retreated back to the streets, where the persistence of the Zeds was beginning to break through the neighborhood fences, which required me to retreat even further away from the target. And then, as I dealt with a group of Zeds who had gathered around the Camaro, a group of about a dozen Mad Max Bandits attempted to run me down. The one good thing about them, besides their immaculate trip, is that they don't carry firearms, so I was able to gun them down relatively easily. But one or two of them would limp off and cause me problems later on. And now, thanks to their interference, I had more undesired attention from the Zeds. But I played it cool and I walked it off. I reloaded my weapons and I picked off the Zeds as they followed. I even managed to catch a rest on the lazy boy inside a home here. Then, a second group of Mad Max witches and wizards came after me. And that's when things got really real. And now there was plenty of unwanted Zed aggro. To make matters worse, the remaining bandits from the initial skirmish were now running around, gathering up large hordes and running them at me. So, in response, I did a little loop-de-loop through the broken fences and started thinking I should make a break for the Camaro. And then, that's when it happened. I came out onto the street and I saw a large horde, and as I scanned the area, there was a clever sprinter embedded among them, pretending to be a walker. And as I turned away, he closed the gap, and he bit me on my stupid hand, piercing through my steel-reinforced leather gloves. Now, just because the fatal blow had been struck, it did not mean that I wanted to die in this crap hole of the Louisville neighborhood. So I made that final attempt to get to the Camaro, and I got out of there. Now, my only regret really is that I did not have the ability to cut off my hand in order to save my life. I've always wanted to sever an infected limb, but this is build 42 and we don't have the technology yet. Anyway, the infection came on fast, but it was still a day ending in Y. So even as I was succumbing to the virus, there was still bandits to be killed. And after killing them, I hardly had time to even begin to set my affairs in order before the virus started to overtake me. And as I prepared to end things in my own way, the virus beat me to the punch. And thus ended Gerardo Coleman's, aka Antlers, reign of terror on the mean streets of Kentucky. He is survived by absolutely no one, and very few will ever know of his exploits. Except for maybe those of you watching this. But he lived for a time, and he did his part to stem the tide of the zombie apocalypse. And someday one would hope that another world-weary traveler will find his horns of power and take on the task of liberating Louisville from its said occupants. But now that the story is told, it's time for me to get out of here. Before I do, I want to give a shout out to my channel members. Thank you Santiago Flo, Gamer Okami, Tyler Jump for Bacon Baconson, and Serena Morgan. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. And actually, there is still one more thing.